There is a growing feeling around Celtic right now that something bigger is at play beyond just results on the pitch, and it is starting to paint a picture that not everyone has fully grasped yet. When you zoom out and take a proper look at the European landscape, especially through the lens of UEFA coefficients, the situation becomes a lot more complex than a single bad result or an unlucky night. It is not about panic, but it is definitely about awareness, because the direction things are heading could shape the club's European future for years. This past campaign in Europe did not completely fall apart, but it certainly left a sense of missed opportunity hanging in the air. There have been worse seasons, no doubt about that, yet everything seemed to hinge on that decisive moment in Kazakhstan. That tie did not just slip away on penalties. It felt like the culmination of deeper issues that had been building beforehand. Preparation, sharpness, and confidence all came into question, and when it mattered most, Celtic could not find the edge needed to push through. It is impossible not to wonder how different the entire narrative would feel if that shootout had gone the other way. Even if progression into the Champions League might have brought its own set of heavy challenges against Europe's elite, the psychological impact alone could have shifted the mood dramatically. Instead, what followed was a transition into the Europa League, where the team managed to steady itself and put together a campaign that, while not spectacular, had moments of genuine competitiveness. Across that run, the points gathered tell an important story. Victories brought solid returns, draws added incremental value, and a final positional bonus rounded things off, leaving Celtic with a respectable but ultimately modest total. Compared to the previous season, there was a noticeable drop, and that decline carries consequences that stretch far beyond a single year. Over the 5-year cycle that UEFA uses, every point matters, and falling short even slightly can push a club further down a ladder that is already incredibly difficult to climb. When you look at where Celtic currently sits in the wider European ranking, it becomes clear just how much ground has been lost. Being positioned well outside the upper tier is not where a club of this stature expects to be, especially considering the history and the expectations that come with it. Teams that once felt like peers are now sitting comfortably ahead, while others are closing in from behind, ready to take advantage of any further slip. That is where the real concern begins to creep in, because these rankings are not just numbers on a page. They directly influence the paths available in European competition, determining how many rounds a team must navigate and the level of opposition they are likely to face. The difference between entering at a later stage or being forced through multiple qualifying rounds can be enormous, both in terms of difficulty and financial impact. Looking ahead to next season, there is still a wide range of possibilities depending on how the domestic campaign unfolds. Finishing at the top would offer a route that, while still challenging, is far more manageable than the alternatives. One decisive tie could stand between Celtic and a place among Europe's elite, a scenario that feels both within reach and frustratingly uncertain at the same time. However, the margin for error is incredibly small. Dropping even a single position in the league table changes everything, shifting the pathway into a far more demanding sequence of qualifiers. Instead of one hurdle, there could be several, each carrying its own pressure and unpredictability. And if things were to slip further, the consequences would be even more significant, potentially leading to participation in a lower-tier competition that does not carry the same prestige or rewards. There is also the added layer of domestic cup success playing a role in shaping European entry points, which introduces another variable into an already complicated equation. Winning silverware could offer a lifeline into a stronger competition, but relying on that alone is never a strategy that brings stability. It becomes clear that consistency across all fronts is essential if Celtic are to maintain a foothold at a higher level in Europe. What makes this entire situation more pressing is the delayed effect of UEFA's coefficient system. The impact of current performances does not fully reveal itself immediately, instead carrying forward into future seasons. That means the challenges being faced now could intensify down the line, creating a scenario where even strong domestic performances might not be enough to offset the structural disadvantages in European qualification. As things stand, the trajectory suggests that tougher routes are on the horizon. More qualifying rounds, stronger opponents earlier in the process, and less margin for recovery if something goes wrong. It is a cycle that can quickly become difficult to break, especially if momentum is not regained soon. And while there is always the possibility of turning things around with a strong run, the reality is that the margin for error continues to shrink with each passing season. When you start projecting beyond next season, that is where the full weight of the situation really begins to settle in, because the structural changes tied to Scotland's coefficient ranking are no longer hypothetical. They are effectively locked in, and they will reshape the entire European pathway for clubs across the country. For Celtic, that means preparing for a reality where the margin for success becomes even thinner and the road to the top competitions grows significantly longer. The drop in the national ranking brings with it a chain reaction that affects every entry point. The league winners would still have access to the Champions League, but the difference lies in how they get there. Instead of facing a single decisive hurdle, there would be multiple qualifying rounds standing in the way, each one presenting a different kind of challenge. It is not just about quality anymore. It is about endurance, consistency, and the ability to handle pressure across several high-stakes ties in quick succession. For the teams finishing just behind the champions, the picture becomes even more demanding. Rather than having a pathway into the Champions League, the focus shifts towards the Conference League, and even that route is far from straightforward. Multiple qualifying rounds would be required just to reach the main stage, turning what used to be an opportunity into a prolonged test of squad depth and mental resilience. Every additional round increases the risk of an early exit, and with it, the loss of valuable points and revenue. The Domestic Cup. Winners would still retain a route into the Europa League, but again, the challenge intensifies. Instead of entering closer to the main phase, they would need to navigate a longer sequence of qualifiers, making the journey significantly more complicated. It becomes clear that across the board, Scottish clubs are facing a future where nothing comes easily, and every step forward requires a sustained level of performance that leaves little room for mistakes. For Celtic, the implications of this shift are profound. Even in the best-case scenario, where the club reasserts itself domestically and returns to winning the league, the European challenge would still be far greater than it has been in recent years. The idea of having to win several consecutive qualifiers just to reach the Champions League group stage is a daunting one, especially when considering how difficult it has already proven to clear fewer obstacles in the current format. At the same time, there is an underlying fear that if standards slip even slightly, the consequences could be much more severe. The domestic landscape is not standing still, and the gap between teams is not guaranteed to remain the same. If Celtic were to find themselves consistently finishing outside the top position, the European outlook would shift dramatically, placing the club in a cycle where the Conference League becomes the regular stage. That is not just a drop in prestige, it is a shift that affects recruitment, finances, and overall ambition. There is, however, a broader context to all of this that offers a slight sense of perspective. These fluctuations in ranking are not entirely unusual for leagues outside the very top tier. There is a pattern that tends to repeat itself, where strong periods lead to improved access, followed by tougher campaigns that result in a decline, before eventually stabilizing and rising again. It is a cycle that has been seen before, and while it does not make the current situation any easier, it does suggest that recovery is possible with the right approach. Part of that recovery could come from embracing the opportunities presented by the Europa League or even the Conference League. While they may not carry the same prestige as the Champions League, they can offer a platform to rebuild confidence and accumulate valuable coefficient points. Competing against teams of a slightly lower level can create chances to string together positive results, something that becomes crucial when trying to climb back up the rankings. There were glimpses of that potential in recent performances, where Celtic showed that it could hold its own against certain opponents and even control games at times. It was not consistent enough, but it demonstrated that the gap is not insurmountable. With the right structure, improved decision-making, and a more stable environment, there is a path towards becoming more competitive on the European stage once again. Looking further ahead, the evolving nature of European competitions adds another layer of uncertainty. UEFA continues to adjust formats and structures, aiming to increase the number of high-profile matches and maximize global interest. While major overhauls are not expected immediately, subtle changes can still have significant effects, particularly for clubs operating outside the financial elite. One potential development that has been discussed involves altering how teams from the same country are kept apart in the early stages. Removing those restrictions could lead to more frequent matchups between domestic rivals on the European stage, creating high-intensity encounters, but also adding another unpredictable element to qualification and progression. It is the kind of change that could reshape narratives overnight, especially in leagues where rivalries already run deep. There are also plans to introduce standalone opening fixtures featuring the defending champions, adding a new layer of spectacle to the competition. While that may not directly impact Celtic's immediate situation, it reflects the broader direction European football is heading in, with an increasing focus on global audiences and marquee moments. For clubs trying to re-establish themselves, adapting to that environment becomes part of the challenge. All of these factors combine to create a landscape that is both demanding and unpredictable. The path forward is not clearly defined, and there are multiple scenarios that could unfold depending on results, decisions, and developments both on and off the pitch. What remains certain is that the coming years will require a level of focus and adaptability that goes beyond what has been seen recently, because the margin for staying competitive in Europe is becoming smaller with every shift in the system. There is also a growing sense that recruitment and long-term planning will play an even bigger role in how Celtic navigate this period. It is no longer enough to build a squad capable of dominating domestically. There has to be a clear vision of how that team translates to European competition. The physical demands, tactical discipline, and mental strength required across multiple qualifying rounds are completely different from a standard league campaign. Without that alignment, even the most talented squads can fall short when faced with the unique pressure of continental football. At the same time, the atmosphere around the club becomes a factor in itself. European nights have always carried a certain energy, but that energy can quickly shift depending on expectations and recent history. If momentum starts to build again, even in the Europa League or Conference League, it can create a platform for belief to return, both on the pitch and in the stands. But if setbacks continue to pile up, the challenge becomes not just about results, but about restoring confidence and identity in a setting where every match feels like it carries extra weight. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. Whispers have begun to ripple through the Scottish game, and they grow louder by the hour. Motherwell FC may be on the verge of losing one of their brightest attacking sparks, with Celtic FC circling for a potential move for Tawanda Maswanhise. Around Fir Park, there's a sense that something is brewing. Those close to the club speak in cautious tones, but there's an understanding that when a side of Celtic stature shows interest, it's rarely without substance. Maswanhise, still carving his name into the Premiership, has been quietly turning heads with his pace, directness, and eye for opportunity in the final third. It's the sort of profile that tends to attract attention from Glasgow's East End. From Celtic's perspective, the move would fit a familiar pattern. The club has long prided itself on identifying emerging talent within Scotland before their value soars. Maswanhise, raw but undeniably gifted, could be seen as a project worth investing in, one that might flourish under brighter lights and bigger expectations. For Motherwell, however, the situation is far less comfortable. Losing a forward of his promise, particularly at a stage where he appears ready to take another step, would represent a significant blow. Supporters have taken to discussing the rumors with a mix of resignation and hope. Resignation that interest from a giant is difficult to resist, and hope that, should the move materialize, the club secures a deal that reflects his growing importance. No official word has emerged from either side, and within the corridors of both clubs, silence remains the order of the day. Yet in Scottish football, silence often speaks volumes. Whether this is mere speculation or the early stages of a genuine transfer saga remains to be seen, but one thing is certain. Maswanhise's name is now firmly in the spotlight, and the story looks far from over. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.